Подача, Остин! Все-таки забил!
Fonte with a stooping header in field!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone and I'm the host of the show, and I'd like to thank you for making the show part of your day. If you haven't done so yet, please connect with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at SFCDELL_IVERY or at facebook.com/SFCDelivery. There's no underscore in the Facebook address. And getting in touch with us at either of those places, we really appreciate it. We'll take any feedback that you do have. And if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to our feed in iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, Tunein Radio, or wherever else that you get your podcasts. And if you haven't found a good way to listen to the show yet, if you haven't found a way that works for you, but you're a SoundCloud user, now the show is on SoundCloud. So the link to that is in the show notes. And you can subscribe to the feed there in SoundCloud to make sure that you don't miss an episode. And it'll have the newest 2 or 3 episodes there. It won't have the full archive, but that's always on the website. And also, you can listen now on YouTube. And so every episode will be on YouTube from episode 30, which is this one, on. And it'll just be a static image with the audio playing in the background. So if either of those work for you, go ahead and subscribe and make sure that you do not miss an episode. We spoke briefly about social media because we do that at the top of every show because that's the easiest way to get in touch and interact with the show. But it takes on a bit of a new meaning this week because we're going to talk with Ben Hernandez-Stroud. He's the owner and writer of the Archers Road End blog, and we'll talk about his history with the club. We'll talk about the blog. We'll talk about the questions surrounding the Southampton's ownership and the possible sale of the club. Our current transfer window, VVD, and we'll look at the match against St. Etienne as well. But Ben works in social media. He works with that stuff. So we do talk a bit about that, and it was a good chat, and I really, really enjoyed it. And the links to all of Ben's social media stuff, both Twitter, Facebook, and the website, are all in the show notes. So please be sure to check them out. And right before we get into the conversation with Ben, at one point we do use a curse word. I don't know if there's any curse word that's better or worse or whatever. So if you're listening with young children, maybe not. Maybe wait until it's just you. And there's also a bit of a hum or some reverb when Ben talks at points, and I didn't hear it when we were recording. I did my best to remove it, but it is still there, so hopefully it doesn't detract from the conversation that we have. So all that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the interview. And once again, this is Ben Hernandez-Stroud. He runs the Archers Road End blog, and hope you enjoy the chat. So we'd like to welcome to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all the SFC fans. Ben Hernandez-Stroud, the owner and writer for the Archers Road End blog. You can find that on Twitter at Archers Road End, and we'll also put the link to the blog in the show notes. So Ben, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Hey Matthew, thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. We'll get to your writing, and we'll get to some other topics, including ownership and the transfer window and all that stuff in a little bit. But let's start with just how you became a Saints fan and where you're from. So where do you live currently? Where are you right now?
I currently live in enemy territory in Tottenham in London, and I've lived in London for about on and off since about 2004. But I was born in Southampton, very close to where St Mary's is now, just across the Etienne Bridge, in a place called Woolston. And my family history with regards to the club is that I grew up. My dad supported the club. My great uncle Bill Stroud used to play for the club, and he made 29 appearances for them, playing in an old position now, which is called half-back. But he scored 4 goals, and officially only made about 29 appearances. But the war broke up a lot of that. The Second World War broke up a lot of that. So he actually, in total, made about 175 appearances. And he later coached the club. I never met the guy, but he did a lot for it. And it was always kind of brought up within my family. So, very proud to kind of have that little part of the club there, really. So, yeah. I feel a great affinity with the club.
Now, does your family still talk about your uncle playing for the club, or does that still come up, or is it kind of just something that you were told when you were younger and they were trying to get you to choose Southampton?
Oh, they didn't need to. I mean, they didn't need to market it to me. I didn't have a choice. I think that when you're down here in Hampshire, there are only two choices, and even though 50% of my family comes from closer to Portsmouth than Southampton, there was never any choice. I was born in Southampton. I was brought up in Southampton, and I was on the stands in Southampton, and it's just part of me.
So now, do you still get to go to a number of matches, or because you live in London, it makes it a little bit more difficult?
I have a membership, and I go whenever I can. And I went a fair few times last season. I went to the Brentford game last week as well. Obviously, the League Cup final. So I go to a lot. I go to a lot of games, and if I'm not watching it, I'm listening to it on the radio. So I kind of get a lot of it. And to be honest as well, even when I can't make the games, some of the getting entertained and getting kept up to date on Twitter is a fantastic way of doing it as well. So I use a variety of different means of keeping up. But yeah, radio there, or just, if I can find a means of watching it if we're live on TV. So yeah, I keep in touch with the club however I can.
Yeah, I had another guy, Tim Marshall, who lives in London, on the show a while ago, and I had asked him, do you have a favorite kind of a venue in and around London that you like to go to and watch the Saints play?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that one of my favourite atmospheres I've ever been at was going to see us play Leyton Orient a few years ago. I think it was in about 2009 and 2010. That was a lovely little stadium. I think the smaller stadiums, the better. When we went to Brentford last weekend in the stand, that was a fantastic experience, and I really missed that. I know there's a lot of debate about standing versus kind of seated, but it was a really wonderful experience just to be able to stand alongside people and just wander around and just have a bit of a sing. So in terms of away days, I always really enjoyed Leyton Orient and Loftus Road, QPR Stadium, even though it's an absolutely awful stadium. It's not very nice. It's a really great place to be, and of course I always love going to Arsenal because it's so quiet, so you can always hear our songs.
My best friend's an Arsenal fan, so I'm going to wind up there at some point. So hopefully it'll be all right.
You'll enjoy it there. Nice, comfortable seats, and everyone's nice and quiet.
All right. Well, I guess if we kind of take a look at the blog at Archers Road End, you've been a fan since childhood, but where does the blog come from? What encouraged you to start writing, or made you want to start writing about the club?
I wanted to start writing about the club because I was incredibly passionate about it. I was one of those people who was always, scrolling through Twitter, just seeing so many different talking points and opinions about the club. And I think some of it was fair and some of it was incredibly unfair. From my perspective, one of the things that I looked at was just how we have short fuses and kind of short memories when it comes to the club, where we've been and where we're going. And I think that I wanted to inject a little bit of calm into it. That's something that's always been kind of a very big thing for me. Have you heard of the chimp paradox?
No.
Well, the chimp paradox is something that I kind of very much buy into, and I think it's something that is kind of pretty central to the way I write almost and what I do. Essentially, the chimp paradox is that our brains evolved in a way from being kind of a little peanut-sized thing to this giant brain that we have today. But when it comes to emotional regulation and it comes to anything that's related to passion, whether it's anger or extreme happiness. The little limbic system in our brain is the bit that tends to kick off more than anything else. It's basically the little nodule right in the center of your brain, and what happens is you basically, everything kind of, when you get angry or when you lose your temper, it takes over. It takes over the frontal lobe, which is where kind of most of your personality is formed, and your parietal element of the brain, which is where you compute and you analyze stuff and then you make decisions. So sometimes this little kind of limbic area just kind of goes nuts, and 9 times out of 10, that's when your team scored a goal, or you hear that Virgil van Dijk's leaving, or you have to listen to a Claude Puel interview. All of those little things, it kind of just all goes nuts, and you're like, I can't stand this. And 9 times out of 10 people are on Twitter. But clubs know that. Clubs don't obviously may not obviously just read this stuff about the chimp paradox, but one of the things that they do is they know they want to get you right there. They want to give you that kind of hit. They want to bring the chimp out, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's very easy to do with us as football fans. So what I wanted to do, one of the things that I kind of work with is that I was diagnosed with ADHD back in January, and one of the things that we have is that, my brain is that it doesn't produce enough dopamine. So you're always looking for that little hit. So combine that sort of short fuse limbic area of the brain, the little chimp going nuts, with a lack of dopamine. So you're always looking for that. And it's a big recipe for trouble. So you're just constantly scanning the Saints FC newsfeed and going, what? Yeah, this has happened. Apparently, and everything's going wrong. We're going to be asset stripped. We're going to be in a non-professional league in 2 years, and everything's going to be going incredibly wrong, and the club's going to die. And you can go through that process all in about a minute. And I think sometimes, you can be typing out a message before you've even had a chance to think about it. So I guess what I wanted to try really hard to do was actually, as an exercise with myself, think about football for a little bit. Take a step back from the club, take a step back from social media, so to speak, and just write something that's taking kind of a reasoned view, looking at all of the evidence and looking at all of the knowledge we have and sprinkling a bit of opinion in there. 9 times out of 10 I'm wrong on opinion, but
that's okay.
I'm honest enough to admit that, because you look at all of the agents and supposed experts on Twitter. I'd love to get a list of journalists and find out how many transfer rumours that they've actually reported as fact, and actually see if what percentage of those actually became a reality. Because I'd be probably betting it's less than 5%. But anyway, that's what I do, and that's why I do it. So I take my time. Don't write anything until I feel like I'm really ready to write something. I like to take my time, and I like to kind of analyse the situation before I really go into it.
So I guess that the blog is more, like you said, an exercise for you to kind of wrap your mind around things and kind of put things in perspective than it is to get hits on a website, right?
Yeah, I'm not doing this to kind of chase any sort of numbers. It's purely a passion project for me, and it just I find it really helpful. I love doing it, and it helps me to do something creative that channels my love for the club into something creative. So yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that 100%. But, I've read through recent posts. I think that I went through the last year or so of last season of posts. And I mean, it's different than what some of the other things that are out there. So, a bit longer. And because you're covering kind of so much time in there, like, I think sometimes we get used to reading just the 1 or 2 minute long articles, that are kind of churned out, and you might read the same thing 3 or 4 times in a day because it's got a different title from a different little writing outlet. But, to go through and read that, you got to kind of have some understanding of what's some of the things that have happened for the club, because you are kind of going over so many different changes and things in time. And I don't know, I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
And
what made you decide to name the blog what you did? How did that come about?
It was just a name that when I used to go to the Dell when I was a kid, I always used to see the Archers Road End, and it was called a little chocolate box. It was always my favourite stand. Just tiny. It kind of encapsulated everything about like a classic old football grounds end, the Archers Road End.
Okay.
It was just an amazing little area. The little chocolate box, everyone knew each other. It was like you were part of a little exclusive club, and that's something that kind of influenced me in that respect.
Now, I think you mentioned, it might have been before we started recording, that you work kind of with social media and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Do you get to write for your job, or is this writing something that's just purely something you wanted to do because you don't get to do it for your job and things like that?
I grew up writing, and I've always loved writing. I'm writing a novel at the moment. It's not about football. I work in social media. I've handled social media for brands, mainly Ministry of Sound, across music and media, Times Educational Supplement, stuff like that. So I've worked with journalists, I've worked with musicians, and at the moment I'm working in technology. So that's kind of the 9 to 5 stuff. This is a case for me and a chance for me to really engage with something that I'm hugely, hugely passionate about.
All right. I understand that 100%. I'm always interested. That's sometimes when I have people on the show, it's like that stuff that I see from them. That's what makes me want to talk to them. I want to know more about that stuff because I think it's interesting because kind of I grew up and was kind of just taught you just, you do your job and you work and there were, there were a few years where I was just miserable because all I did was work. And then it was like, so doing this, I mean, the podcast takes quite a bit of work, but I am so much happier doing it and getting to talk to other people and all those opinions. So I do appreciate you doing that.
You engage in your passions, and I think that it's actually really important because if you don't, you just end up not feeling happy. Yeah. And there's nothing worse for you and your family and your friends to be around someone who's not happy because they're not actually embracing, their passions. My wife's incredibly supportive in that respect. She knows that I love. She knows that I how much I love football. I might be a little bit down if we've lost heavily, or I might be a little bit annoyed if there's something happened in the game. Mm-hmm. I've learned to take a bit more of a deep breath of that. Once when I went to a game when we were really, really bad. This wasn't when we were in League One. This was when we were on our way down. Okay. We were in the Championship in the first season. It was a game against Preston North End. And we weren't playing fantastically well, but anyway, Danny Dicchio went up to take a free kick just outside the 18-yard box, and Danny Dicchio was never really kind of what you call an amazing player or a free kick specialist. He was a good player, but no great shakes. But he took a free kick, and it was a really pretty tame free kick, and Kelvin Davis went down to catch it, and it just rolled through his arms, just squirmed through his arms, just trickled over the line, and I stood up and I kicked a hole in the chair in front of me.
Oh man!
And no one was sat in it, thankfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to sit there for the rest of the game with this kind of this reminder that I was the guy, I was the sort of person who kicked a hole in the chair.
Yeah.
A game of football, and that wasn't a great game. I think it ended in a 2-2 draw, but yeah, that wasn't a classic. That was when we had some absolutely awful players playing for us. We had some great ones, but that was when we had some real people who didn't seem very interested in playing for the club, and we had an ownership who didn't really seem very interested or engaged.
Yeah. it's kind of a good segue into talking about the current ownership. There were a lot of rumors end of the season and even into the summer that we were selling, or the club was selling, that the Liebers were going to sell 80%, and it was going to be to this Chinese company, and it was there, and then it stopped, and then it was back, and now I think the most recent thing I've read, and I could be wrong, is that all of the paperwork is kind of done. They're just waiting for the financial transaction. But what's your kind of perspective on that, and what impact do you think it has? I want to talk about the impact you think it has on the club and our transfer window and all that stuff. So what's going on from your perspective? What have you seen from the club in terms of selling?
Obviously, I think now we're in a position where there's a desire for CAC. I think it comes from a good place. I think that anything that Marcus and CAC have done as a family for us as a football club has come from a good place. They put a lot of their personal wealth into Southampton Football Club. And I think when it comes to selling, whether it's selling players or selling the football club, I'd probably say they've done enough for us that they're kind of entitled to take a little bit back out of that. I don't think, and I think the numbers bear this out, I don't think that they're just selling players and then just, Kat's just shoving the money in her back pocket and going to Monte Carlo, to a casino. I think the money's actually reinvested, and I think one of the biggest legacies for us as a club, and one of the things that I think we should be eternally grateful to them for, is not just remembering that they pulled us back from the brink, but investing 50 plus million in this amazing training complex that we have. Our training really is state of the art, and we have a fantastic building and a fantastic academy. We're investing in the right things. I would much rather that we spent money on developing our academy and developing our infrastructure in the club than doing what clubs like West Ham do, and just going out and just going, oh well, we've got 50 million to spend this summer, why don't we just go out and buy a goalkeeper who's conceded 64 goals in 32 games, but he's got a big name, and why don't we spend 7 million in January on a 33-year-old who's clearly on the wane. The transfer window's nuts, and I can almost see why Kat's looking at this and going, I need to get out of this. I don't have that investment to take the club to that level, that the club that matches fans. Everyone's ambitious, but I think the expectations of us to spend a lot of money are high and not always justified.
Right.
So I think it's right that they look to sell. And I think it's actually, I think obviously it has impacted our transfer window to a certain extent, but I can't see anything happening this transfer window in terms of selling. If I was a potential buyer, I'd be running a mile from this transfer window because it's insane.
Yeah. No, it is absolutely crazy. And I was kind of looking at all of the transfers of those teams around us, and people have spent a lot of money. And you look at what Everton's done so far, and that's just the entire spine of their team has changed. And that might be too much change. That might be, these guys got to play together and learn to work together. And that might be enough to keep them out of the top six in and of itself,
Yeah.
And then you got West Ham, who are out there spending money, and it's like, man, you just spent a crap load of money, and part of it, I think, is they got to fill that stadium.
Yeah. It's a big stadium, and I kind of travel past it from time to time. They've got a fantastic fan base, but they're going to struggle to fill that, and I think they're going about it in the wrong way. I think people just want to see committed players. I don't think people just want to see big players.
Right. Do you think that the lack of a sale, or just the rumor of a sale, is kind of limiting our progress at all? Or do you think that we still have the players in our academy and within the club, and that we are, generally, I think what some people get frustrated by is that we see all these big name players going for semi-ridiculous prices and sometimes decent prices, but we see them going elsewhere, and we never seem to be linked with the big move. We always seem to be linked with some guy out of the second division in France that nobody's ever heard of. I don't know. Do you think that we still have enough in the tank to be able to do that and continue to improve?
Oh, 100%. I think that we've got a great squad at the moment, as it is. And I think a couple of additions would be handy. But I think that if you buy a player at their very peak for a lot of money, there's only one way that player's going to go. That player's not going to go to another peak. That player's going to be, you'll get 2 or 3 seasons out of them at the most, maybe even kind of, a couple of seasons at least before their form starts to dip and they start to make less of an impact. And I think that our strategy of buying players with potential and turning them into the finished product, I think it benefits the players and I think it benefits the club because it allows us to, and I think we have to be realistic about this, it allows us to, stay competitive. Selling players allows us to stay competitive. You see a lot of those starting 11 memes of if Southampton kept all their best players, where would they be now? And everybody would be like, wow, that's a Champions League club. That's a league-winning club. But people forget that if you wouldn't have sold Adam Lallana, we wouldn't have got Sadio Mane.
Right.
If we wouldn't have missed out on Toby Alderweireld, we might not have got Virgil van Dijk. And so on and so forth, swapping Lambert for Pella and all of that sort of stuff. Trading and buying and selling is a part of the club, and I think it's one that we've got to be realistic about. If you're going to have a player, protect them with a long contract, and I think that the realism that sets in for fans, and I think it's one thing that we're going to have to accept is that. Unless you are Barcelona, unless you are Manchester United, unless you are an absolutely huge club, if a genuinely exceptional talent joins you've got them for 2 seasons.
Yeah,
that's it. Because even down to players in our younger players like Jake Hesketh, signing extended contracts. I think if you probably asked Jake Hesketh, in all honesty, he wouldn't be sitting there going, "I'm going to spend my whole career with Southampton."
Right.
I don't. Football doesn't work like that. They're professionals and they look at it as a career. And yes, there are better ways to go about leaving clubs, which we cover when we talk about VVD.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we have to accept if we get a top player, which is fairly often, we have to kind of accept that they'll be with us 1 or 2 seasons, for a couple of seasons at the most, before they go elsewhere. And even in the case with VVD, with him going to Liverpool, even that will be a stepping stone for him if he does go, because he'll be looking at that and going, well, if I do well at Liverpool back in the Champions League, I'll be able to get a move to Madrid, I'll be able to get a move to Barcelona, I'll be able to get a move to no offence Liverpool, but a really, really big club.
I agree, and I would love to see him go play at a club like that, but we'll get to that in a second. So just I guess a couple more questions about the ownership. What risks are out there if the sale of the club does go through, whether it be later this season or next transfer? What have you any experience kind of seeing other clubs be sold and having things that don't kind of go well for them?
Well, we've had it here. We had it when Rupert Lowe, who wasn't a great chairman, although he should always be. We should bear in mind that he's the reason we've got St Mary's Stadium. When he sold it to a consortium with Michael Wilde and Leon Crouch, this was back in, I think, about 2004, 2005. The club just descended into a mess of infighting, and there was money that they said was available that then wasn't available, and then you realised that there was actually no backing to Wilde and Crouch, and then they started fighting. And it just turned into an absolutely huge mess. And then Rupert Lowe kind of came back in and scooped everything back up again. And the club continued to decline. So we've seen the impact of bad ownership here at Southampton. I think that a lot of the older fans will look at new ownership and really want to know that due diligence has been done on them. So the Lander Group, the purchase is being handled by UBS, I understand. A big enterprise bank, and I think that gives me slightly more heart that things are going about it. We're going about it in the right way.
Okay.
But I can completely understand why people are kind of going, oh well, do they have the money to back this up? And I think that's completely fair, and that's what the due diligence process is in place for. And it should also be pointed out that a lot of clubs are kind of financed and owned in the manner that Lander are going to be, would potentially be coming into. Money is raised from certain sources. Money is cash is pretty liquid in that respect. So there'll be multiple kind of fundraisers putting in money at different times. But I can understand completely why fans are kind of slightly reticent, because we're so used to having a private owner who has put their own money into the club and it's backed up. So I can understand that. And also looking at clubs like United, if United spend a couple more seasons outside the Champions League, they're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Right. So your gut feeling is kind of that we're not selling this summer. It's gone on kind of too long.
Yeah, I think it's from Lander's perspective as well. I think they're looking at the transfer market and go, well, why would we want to get involved in this transfer market? It's insane.
Yeah, and they're going to be expected, if they do purchase the club, to come in and spend money immediately. I think that's what I've gathered, and I could be misreading some stuff, but that's kind of what I've seen. So yeah,
and I think further to that point, I think we're reaching the absolute peak transfer madness. I don't think that next summer will be as bad as this. I think that you're looking at this is fueled by television money, and once the television money and the rights money, once the cost starts to outweigh the benefit for the TV companies and the companies all around the world who invest in football, they start to lower the amount they're willing to invest in it. So, the Premier League has a product that has a very high stock at the moment. The football stock is very high. But the moment they realise that they're investing more money than the benefit that they're actually getting for it, streaming is taking a huge chunk out of TV revenue. Fans are getting their information and their football from different sources. They're less trustworthy of kind of the marketing and the brand perspective of things. I think we've seen the peak of it this summer, and I don't think it'll be the same after that. I think we're in for a period of normalisation.
All right. Well, it seems like every team has broken their club record transfer fee within the last year and a half, and it's only getting worse. If Neymar goes for however many million.
Kylian Mbappe, and the fact that he could potentially be worth £161 million, someone who's only played really kind of 14 proper professional games.
Yeah. Kind of looking at our transfer window. I woke up Friday morning, and I have now a sick obsession we were talking about earlier. I wake up and the first thing I do is shut my alarm off and then look at Twitter, and that's just maybe the most unhealthy thing I can do, because when I got up on Friday morning, Twitter was having a meltdown. Somebody had posted in a forum that Van Dijk to Liverpool was done, and everyone, and then you try to verify it, but everybody's just kind of going off that one point, and it's just getting kind of recycled over and over and over. And sometimes our club isn't very open about our transfer business, and then kind of, do you think maybe the tight-lipped approach of our club kind of allowed that to go on for a little too long, or do you think the club stepped in at an appropriate time and kind of had that article come out that he wasn't going anywhere, or what's your view on that?
Well, for any article that Jeremy Wilson actually puts out into the public domain that is relating to Southampton Football Club, it's essentially been typed by Les Reed, or right after Les Reed has put the phone down to him. He's a very well-connected journalist, and he's one that, you look at his stories, they're always incredibly reliable. And everything went into meltdown off of the back of one rumour in a forum with a guy who has a fairly decent hit rate, but I would imagine that a lot of it is guesswork. I think that the club's damned if it does, and it's damned if it doesn't. If you are a club that does all of its business like Liverpool and like Tottenham, if you do all of your business out in the open, you'll be hammered for it. If we started talking about players that we're interested in, you can guarantee that another 5 or 10 million will be slapped on that price tag. Mm-hmm. And with regards to Virgil van Dijk, if we sell him and when we sell him, whether it's this window or next summer, you can guarantee that the prices will go up. So I think that there's, yes, it's annoying when the club doesn't, come out and quash every rumour, but I can understand the logic behind it, because if you do that, then Les Reed and Ross Wilson won't actually have any time to invest in finding good players for us. They spend most of the time on the phone to journalists saying, no, so-and-so's not for sale, and so on and so forth.
Now, do you think that these types of outbursts that we saw on Friday, do you think that does any long-term damage to the relationship between the club and the fans, even though there maybe really isn't a whole lot of substance there?
That's a really good question. I think that with some fans, yes. With others, no. I know that sounds like you're kind of sitting on the fence, but some fans would like us to be a club that goes out, says, we're going to sign so-and-so, let's chuck a load of money at it, and we're going to make a really big deal out of everything. We're going to brief the press and, and try and unsettle players. I think people would like that. I think some people would like that. But I think it's the approach that people have towards football. Some people see it as kind of some game where if you spend the most money, you'll win. Some people see it's if you buy smartly and develop players, you'll have a better chance of it. So I think it comes down to mentality and just different viewpoints ultimately. Some people will naturally always be impatient. Some people will kind of naturally always take the long view. Social media demands immediate response and, immediate succour. So with regards to that, I think that it's destroyed the news cycle. It's destroyed the way that clubs can actually kind of communicate with fans. In some ways, it's been much better. And in some ways it's a lot worse because if they're constantly needing to put out statements about unverified information, then it actually detracts from them actually doing their job. Like I said, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And whenever Les Reed pops up anyway to say, yeah, we're planning on a quiet summer, everyone's like, no, you're not going to have that. No one believes you. So, I don't know what the guy can do really.
Right.
I think he's done a fantastic job. He's been with us for a very long time, and I think that lots of people will go, oh well, he sells our best players, but the guy's not a miracle worker. If we were able to keep hold of these players and we were able to just incrementally increase their salaries. Mm-hmm. In the way that other clubs can, you think that he wouldn't do that? I think he probably would do. Right. So, I just think we've kind of got to give the guy a break. He's operating underneath, owners, and he's operating within financial constraints. And I think we have to kind of respect that.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of one more question before we move on and talk about the match that was played this weekend. You work with social media quite a bit. In terms of gauging fan happiness or satisfaction, how difficult is that to do via social media? Because sometimes on social media, I think it's the people who type the most and who can use all caps and use the hashtag a ton, that kind of set the tone. And sometimes, there are a lot of people on Twitter have, 1,000 or maybe 2,000 followers, but St. Mary's seats a lot more than that, So do you think that it's an appropriate kind of representation of the fan base that we see on Twitter or Facebook?
No, I don't. I think it's amplified. And I think it's a bit of a bubble. I think that what you have to look at is you have to look at what's happening on the pitch, and then you have to look at what's happening in the stands. That's the best. That's the best representation. Look at the season ticket holders. Are they happy? At some point last season, there was a huge disconnect between Claude Puel and the fans. I mean, I think we had that really at the start of the season because you look at the guy and he never really got a song. I think that's actually a really important point. If you're a Southampton manager and people aren't singing your name from from October onwards, and you've had a fair crack at the whip, I don't think you're long for the job personally. So I think once the fans started seeing this kind of frustrating style of play and everything like that, it kind of boiled over into social media and got amplified. Yeah, I don't think it's the be all and end all. I think the club has to take a dispassionate view. I think it has to look at what's going on the pitch and acknowledge the supporters' frustrations if they see it in the ground. They see how the players are reacting. I think that there are so many different variables. If you look purely at social media, the club would just always be in an absolute crisis, and we're far from that. I actually think we've had a very good transfer window.
Yeah. Okay. Now moving on to the match from yesterday. Granted, it was a friendly.
Yeah.
We came away with a 3-0 win, and kind of my opinion of the friendlies, it's never really about the score. I don't like to lose, but I think there are a lot more important things that go on. I didn't have a chance to watch it because I was in the car and I was trying to stream it, but kept going through mountain passes and that stuff. But what did you make of the match overall?
It was typical pre-season fare. Saint Etienne are a lot further ahead in their preparations than we are by about a week. I think it's really good that we're playing teams who are a week ahead in their preparations, because it means that the players are really given a good fitness workout. It was a game where it was played at walking pace a lot of the time, and but there were kind of lots of little nuggets to be impressed by. I like the fact that we're going back to kind of pressing teams, and I was also really happy with the fact that we seem to be converting the stuff that we're putting into the box now. A lot was made of the crosses last season. People going, we put so many balls into the box, why are we not converting them? I think that the big reason is that we were putting all these balls into the box, but there was no follow-up once the strikers missed their chance. Now we're pressing teams. Now the midfield is pressing up into the box, right, and the whole team is pressing as a unit. When those balls are put into the box, it's more likely that a midfielder will be on hand, as Prowsey was, or another player will be on hand to mop up a shot if our strikers don't convert an opportunity.
Right.
Really impressed with Matt Targett yesterday. He deserves a lot of credit for the two assists. Didn't get much game time last season through injury, but I think seeing him as a useful part of the squad is fantastic. And as a local boy, it's good to see him in the team. James Ward-Prowse took his goal very well, and but I was really impressed once again with Gabbiadini's finish. It's not spectacular, but what I love about watching him is his movement. Right. He's such a clever player, but in a very direct way, and that's something that he's not a back to goal player. He's very much a forward-thinking striker. I know that sounds like a bit of a funny thing to say, but he's always looking for the space in between the defenders, always looking for it, and he attacks it. And this goal was very similar in style to a lot of the goals he scored. The disallowed one in the League Cup final, the one he did score in the first one he did score in the League Cup final, the goal he scored against Sunderland, which kind of went in, bumbled off his shoulder. But in all of those goals, he's in between the defenders. He's giving them something to do, and he just ghosts in there. And I think that's going to be incredibly valuable for us.
Yeah.
This season, he offers a very different option to Charlie Austin, who's more of an out kind of, a striker.
Right.
Gabbiadini's incredibly clever, and I think that's going to do very well for us this season.
Now, both of them were on the pitch yesterday at the same time, and as I was getting ready to leave, I was looking at the lineup and kind of wondering who's going to play where. Is it going to be a 4-4-2? Is it going to be some sort of a 4-3-3? Or I think that we came out in kind of a 4-2-3-1, but the highlights didn't really show me kind of where everybody was playing. So what did you think about the interplay between those two, or how they played with each other on the pitch? I
think it gave Gabbiadini a little bit more time to kind of drop off and do his drifting thing. I think that Austin's very much a focal point sort of striker. I think it just allows more movement. Pellegrino was looking at his options and just kind of seeing how they play together. So, yeah, I think it was interesting. But the most interesting thing for me was really our wide plays got a lot better. Jeremy Pede struggles with his defending, and his short passing, but he's very dynamic and very good at putting crosses into the box. So that's something, and I guess that shows that he was originally a midfielder.
Right.
I mean, his short passing is actually pretty atrocious, but his crosses into the box are pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, when you try to convert a player like that to play fullback, there can be some definite defensive lapses. But I guess the modern fullback it's supposed to get forward so much that sometimes we can overlook that a little bit. But
sure.
You got guys like Ryan Bertrand who are just so good at doing both of those. And as much as I hate Kyle Walker, I think he's just a bad person. And maybe that's harsh, but he is so good at doing that. He epitomizes the kind of modern fullback. When you can watch guys like that and then watch somebody who doesn't quite have both parts of the game, I think it becomes more and more exposed. And but hopefully, like you said, you were talking about Target. Hopefully, he can continue to improve, because he took a lot of people were saying he's not ready. He's not good enough. I don't know. Give him some time. He's definitely not fast, but I think he can get the job done.
No one will ever be good enough until they play a few games.
That's true.
You've just got to be patient with some players, and that's the same with Buffal. I think that some of the stick that Buffal got last season was, I think, unjustified. When you have a creative player, you have to allow them to make mistakes. Because 9 times out of 10, with a creative player, he'll attempt something and it won't necessarily come off. But that one time that it does come off, that's when you get a little bit of magic.
Right.
And I think you have to be patient with him. I think that we weren't necessarily as patient with him. He was trying things, he was getting frustrated, and he was an attacking player playing in a conservative team last season. So I think we'll see a lot more of Buffal this season.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's kind of move on. We got a few questions we can answer from some of the listeners, and then we'll kind of wrap it up here. But
right.
Dan, who is at Holy Hoiberg, asked if you had to give our current transfer rating a rating out of 10, our current transfer window rating out of 10, how would you rate it?
I think it's probably a solid 7. We haven't sold any of our crown jewels. I think Rodriguez wasn't the same player when he came back from injury. So I think 14 million is incredibly good business for him. And it gives him a fresh start, really. Psychologically, I think it couldn't have been good for him to be at the club. Whilst people kind of would look at him and go, well, he's not the Rodriguez that, we bought, essentially. So I think 14 million was really good. Bednar X1 for the future. I think we might bring in a couple more players. But I think retention, if we get to the end of the window and we've retained some players, I think that would be good, and that would elevate it to an 8 for me. A couple more players and some retention, that would be good. I think we'd be flying then.
All right. Speaking of retention, would you rather sell Virgil van Dijk and reinvest the money in the squad, or would you rather force him to stay if he doesn't want to be here?
I don't think forcing a player to stay, if they're clearly going to kick off, is very beneficial. But what I will say is that if we do sell, let's get the highest price possible for him and reinvest smartly. If we don't, which is looking like we probably won't, although I'm prepared to be wrong on that, I think that he'll knuckle down. There's too much for Van Dijk to lose through having a tantrum.
Right.
There's too much for him to lose. It's World Cup year. And teams look at attitude as well as quality. And if you have a player who's sulking, they'll look at it, and even someone like Liverpool will look at it and go, well, if we want to sign him, and we do sign him, and then in a season and a half's time, Real Madrid come in for him or Barcelona come in for him, is he just going to go, oh, I'm not playing anymore? Right. So they look at it like that, and I think that we get one more. I hope we get one more season out of him. But if not, and if he's still this time next week, he's still agitating and he's not training properly, that's when I think we kind of say, okay, let's call it a day. So we'll see. You can't force an unhappy player to stay. It's bad for the club, and I think Pellegrino made the right move by kind of letting him train on his own this week. And I'm sure he had a few meetings with Les Reed, had some conversations, and I think we'll get one more season out of him.
Yeah, I can't fault the way management has handled this situation. I think they were up front with the fans and clear with the fans about their stance on selling him. But I really do think the player, he has some power here. That I think that more of the power lies with the player than with the club in terms of getting him to stay here or not. We can force him. We can force him to stay, but really, nobody wants to see Van Dijk sit in the reserves or especially given he's our captain and all that stuff. But I think, like you said, the World Cup and all that stuff, it makes it so he's got to go out and play this year because he needs to put himself on the stage in the league and then again in the World Cup, and then he can get a move to pretty much wherever he wants. I think he is that good. So
totally, 100%.
One last question here from Jem, who is at Simply Romeo. What's your predicted formation and lineup for Swansea, the first game of the season?
Predicted formation, same as yesterday. But I think apart from Redmond coming in, and Bertrand and Van Dijk, hopefully if he's mentally ready, we won't see that much difference. I think that's they're experimenting with the playing style, but they're not experimenting too much with the shape. I think Pellegrini, has got his strategy and he's got his tactics kind of there. He's communicating with those players and he's wanting to be consistent with it. I think that the shape we're seeing now will be similar to the shape that we see on opening day.
All right. Which centre back do you think makes way for Van Dijk? Stevens or Yoshida?
I would probably say that's a tough one. Heart says I'd like to see Yoshida in there, but my head would say Stevens and Van Dijk because Stevens reminds me of Klaus Lundekvam in terms of he's a fantastic ball-playing centre-back and he'll go on to be a very, very, very good player.
Yeah.
So that would be our best centre-back pairing.
I think so. And I'm with you there with the Heart saying Yoshida. Like, I want to see him play, but I think the best thing for the club in the long term is to have Stevens develop alongside somebody like Van Dijk for a year and then be the stability there, Yeah,
exactly.
So, yeah. Yeah, and I, like you said, I think Cedric will come in. I'm interested in what's going to happen with Stephen Davis playing next to Romeu, who's, I wonder, it seems like there's a little bit more competition out wide, especially if Buffal's going to play a little bit better. So maybe Ward-Prowse has to push back inside or something like that, but I'm not sure. We'll see how it all kind of pans out.
Definitely.
But I'm looking forward to it. And I guess, what do you think the atmosphere will be like when we play at home, our first home game?
I think better. I think it's going to be a better atmosphere. I think that the frustrations were very apparent towards the end of the last season, and I think that we're going to see kind of a fresh start. So I think we'll see total backing and a bit more patience. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. Well, Ben, do you have anything else you'd like to kind of say before we wrap this up?
No, thank you very much for having me on. I've had a great time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you you putting up with the time difference, and I'd like to encourage anybody listening to check out the Archers Road End. Give them a follow on Twitter at Archers Road End, and visit the new Facebook page and the blog, and the links to all those things are in the show notes. And I'd love to have you on again at some point, Ben, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And I just thanks for just giving me your time.
Oh, thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you.
And once again, that was Ben Hernandez Stroud. You can find Ben on Twitter at Archers Road End. You can like the Facebook page at facebook.com/Archers Road End. And you can follow his blog at archersroad.wordpress.com. The links to all of those are in the show notes, and we do appreciate you checking them out, giving them a like, giving them feedback. That's what we all want. And this show is also on Twitter at SFCDELL_IVERY and on Facebook at facebook.com/SFCDelivery. There's no underscore in the Facebook address. And follow along, stay up to date with all the news. If you haven't subscribed to a feed yet, you only listen to the show when you see it or whatever, you can subscribe to the feed in iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, pretty much wherever else you get your podcast, and as of now, on SoundCloud and YouTube as well. So links to those are in the show notes. Choose the one that works best for you. Subscribe. Be sure that you don't miss an episode, and you will get a new episode each and every Tuesday. And It's a lot of fun to do, and I hope that you enjoy listening, and I thank you very much for doing that. I'll also like to thank the fans who sent in questions. Please don't be shy. Send in your question each and every week. We will do our best to answer them. Sometimes there's so many that we can't get to them all. Sometimes there's only a few, and we can get to them for sure. So send them in. We'll do our best. We'll have some fun with them. And it's a good way to interact, for me to interact with you, and I really do enjoy that. If you have been listening to the show and you're enjoying it, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. By doing that, it helps other people find out about the show. It helps push the show further up the charts and helps more people get exposed to the show. So we always do appreciate those. And we'll be back next week. As always, we'll have Ewan Campbell, who you may remember Ewan from the Ugly Inside Season in Review panel they did last year. He was on the panel, and he's going to join us to talk just about the team. We'll look back on the 2 preseason games that we'll do to finish up our preseason, and we'll look ahead to our opening day match against Swansea. So I'm getting excited. I think everybody else is getting excited. So hopefully we have some good things to talk about, and hopefully we'll get off to a positive start this year. So before we go, we'd like to thank Matt from the We Are Southampton page on Instagram for all the work he's done for us. He's done the logo. He's been a guest. He has given me lots and lots of feedback. So special thanks to Matt from the We Are Southampton page. And for match day edits, polls, competitions, and more, be sure to check out We Are Southampton on Instagram. And that pretty much does it for this week. So once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for the feedback. We do appreciate it. And until next time, remember that together we march on.